Hello, Mark Sutt with HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro and Hurricane HD, the iPad version, your video blog for June the 6th, 2013. Thanks for joining me today. Obviously, the top story, Tropical Storm Andrea, down in the Gulf of Mexico here, classic comma shape to it. I think it's pretty fascinating. If you recall yesterday's video blog, I outlined the GFS map showing a pretty good convective band predicted, and here it is. This is what it looks like. It was a curved comma shape. Go back and look at yesterday's blog. You'll see that the GFS model accurately predicting not only the event itself, but the shape of it, the way the convection and the showers and thunderstorms would align. Now, this is very typical of a sheared system where the wind is generally blowing across the system and not in a nice clockwise, even pattern around it with high pressure aloft. This is a sheared environment, but Andrea is moving with the flow as well, so that's helping it to some extent. And there's just enough of that diffluent air where the air is spreading out here and even down here. This is almost like a little front. And again, it's a mixture. There's some dry air punching in, even some energy coming in from the atmosphere itself. So not subtropical in nature. It's definitely a tropical storm, warmer in the center than it is around the edges. And the wind is generally concentrated closer to the center than it is spread out. But it's a different type of tropical storm than we're used to seeing in August and September, but a garden variety for June in the Gulf, if you ask me. Experience over the last 15, 20 years that I've been doing this shows me that this is a typical type system when you have a high shear environment or just enough shear to keep it basically lopsided, where you've got if you just draw in the right front quadrants here, the different quadrants, here's the right front and the left rear, left front, left rear, etc. This is dry, whereas the right front side and the northeast quadrant, etc., and the southeast quadrant are wet. And that's typically what you see in a sheared system. Another thing to point out, all of this onshore flow here going to push the water onto the Florida coast, and that's going to create a storm surge threat anywhere from 3 to 5 feet of inundation above ground level. So people in the normally storm surge prone areas, be aware of this, as it can create property damage. Those rough seas out there too, something to keep in mind. Look at the radar, very well defined center of circulation for such a early season system. It's really trying its best to organize. The water temperatures out here, though not indicated on this particular map, are right around 80 degrees, maybe even a degree under that, and it's really trying to take advantage of everything it can, which is impressive. The atmosphere wanting to create these tropical cyclones right now shows me that it's going to be probably an active season as predicted. In these rain bands is typically where you're going to find the heavier, not only rainfall, which is obvious, but also the increase in wind. Gusty winds, possibility of tornadoes, brief, short-lived tornadoes, but they can be a problem. Stay tuned and keep your NOAA weather radio handy, or other Twitter, social media text alert programs. This whole mess of rain and the storm itself will move inland over Florida and basically ride the I-95 corridor through Georgia and the Carolinas, bringing all this inclement weather with it. In fact, the forecast track over the next few days brings it through the southeast, exiting over the mid-Atlantic states and northeast, finally into the Canadian Maritimes, where by the end of the weekend, it'll be but a distant memory, hopefully. Looking at the steering pattern, why isn't this and why didn't it get stuck down here and then head over to Texas or Mexico as an example? Well, here's the Bermuda high, for the lack of a better way to describe it. It's the subtropical high out here in the Atlantic, and it's a little bit thicker, warmer air mass than this is. This is less dense. Rising air, moist air, is less dense than drier, warmer air. This air out here is a lot thicker, and so you have the Bermuda high kind of blocking it from going to the east directly, and then you've got this trough of low pressure and its associated stream flow, which is out of the southwest. You can clearly see that on the little wind barbs here. Look, follow the arrow, the turn right there. It has nowhere else to go. It's not going to run into this big bubble of high pressure, so it comes down. Well, it didn't come down. It got scooped up, and it's going to move off to the northeast, its path of least resistance. And it was going out another 12 hours or so from the previous shot. This valid tomorrow morning, so by Friday morning, this will be sitting up over the low country of South Carolina along I-95 there. So a nasty day for sure along the Carolina coast. But that's why it's not going to Texas. It got its birth down here. Had we had a large area of high pressure sitting to its north, it would have been blocked and headed back to the west around that high pressure. But you clearly see that these wind barbs here go a different direction, and so it's just going to follow that stream flow and get ejected out to the north and east. With it, a lot of rainfall. Yeah, several inches of rain falling from Florida all the way up through the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic states, and then even some of that moisture getting squeezed out up into the interior sections of Pennsylvania and New York. A wet time of it ahead for sure. Wanted to point something out to you. Hurricane Pro having a nice upgrade as of late. The graphical tropical weather outlook map presented up here. You can scroll along the different little dots here. You slide it over, you can see something different. You want to track the storms and the storm itself, you just tap that guy right there. That gal, in this case, Andrea. You tap that, and voila, you go to the tracking map. You got to think about apps that if you want to tap on something, they generally take you to something else. Any type of prominently featured icon or denotation in the app will bring you to something else. And in this case, if you tap on the name, Andrea, it'll take you to the tracking map as an example. And, you know, these dots here mean that you can slide this back and forth. The little refresh icon up there. It just takes some getting used to, right? And we're all learning these mobile devices and what they do. The back button means back, etc., etc. And in this case, if you were to click these guys down here, these would advance you through the different frames of the forecast track. So I just thought I'd give you a little tutorial on how to get the best use out of Hurricane Pro. And, you know, the Hurricane HD version for iPad has not had an update just yet, and people used to using that interface. What great graphics that's got. I tell you what, the iPad edition, fantastic. And hopefully you learn something from these videos in either of those apps, the iPhone or the HD edition for iPad. All right? Well, that is it for Andrea. The rest of the tropics, not an issue at all, not even in the Eastern Pacific. Again, I am Mark Sudduth. My website, hurricanetrack.com. Check it out sometime. Always glad to do these videos for you, and hopefully they enlighten you a little bit about the true goings-on in the tropics, and maybe even better prepare you for those impacts. I'll be back tomorrow with another look at Andrea.